Let's dive straight into today's explainer. It's June 18th, 2026, and honestly, the tech world is experiencing a massive, seismic restructuring across multiple fronts. This isn't just high-level corporate drama. This friction directly dictates the future of the apps, the platforms, and the software we all rely on every single day. We're going to map out exactly what's happening, why it matters, and where the dominoes are going to fall next.
Here's our roadmap for today. First, the G7 AI splinter, then Google's closed-source pivot, the sole origin story, the ticking AI clock, and finally, some quick hits on the state of the AI world. All right, part 1, the G7 AI splinter, and some serious geopolitical irony over in France. Picture this. Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei is sitting directly across from President Trump at the G7 working lunch in Evian-les-Bains. He's passionately urging allied democratic nations to share their testing and cyber defense tools. Backed by heavy hitters like Sam Altman and Demis Hassabis, Amodei's core message was a direct plea to world leaders: resist the temptation to splinter as this technology advances.
But here's the kicker. The sheer irony of the situation is off the charts. While Amodei is eloquently preaching borderless collaboration, Anthropic's own flagship products, Fable 5 and Mythos 5, are completely dark. They are offline because of a U.S. Commerce Department export control order. So you've got this wild paradox. He's on the global stage asking for unity, while his own host government has actively banned his software, and his tech teams are scrambling in D.C. to negotiate a fix.
Well, the international community definitely didn't miss that irony. Right after Amodei spoke, French President Emmanuel Macron fired back with a pretty stark warning of his own. He pointed out that if unilateral U.S. actions can literally just turn off the switch from one day to the next, that does incalculable damage to the whole multi-trillion-dollar global AI race.
So, what we're looking at here is the ultimate ideological tug-of-war playing out globally. On one hand, you have the strict national security perspective. Anthropic shipped a model with a vulnerability. They absolutely must comply with Washington, D.C., and national security just outweighs global alignment, period. But on the other side, you have the AI sovereignty argument from leaders like Macron and Amodei, arguing that democracies have to cooperate and avoid these massive, unilateral disruptions to critical infrastructure. We aren't taking sides here, but grasping this exact friction is absolutely crucial to understanding the gridlock.
Moving to part 2, Google's closed-source pivot, or the anti-gravity takeover. Down in the developer trenches, things are moving just as aggressively. Effective today, Google has completely shut down its massively popular open-source Gemini CLI. This TypeScript-based project was huge. We're talking over 104,000 GitHub stars, heavily driven by the community. And they're replacing it with the closed-source, Go-based Ant-Gravity CLI. Users are basically being shoved from a beloved collaborative tool onto a totally proprietary platform with only a 30-day notice.
Now, why the sudden, drastic pivot? Look at the immense forcing functions hitting the market right now. SpaceX just casually dropped $60 billion to acquire Cursor. Microsoft is in full emergency mode, routing GitHub capacity through Amazon servers. Plus, Google is desperate to unify its own desktop and CLI architecture to go head-to-head with Anthropic's Claude Code. It's a mad dash for vertical integration, and they are doing it overnight.
But man, the developer friction this is causing is absolutely brutal. Thousands of people who freely contributed to the open-source Gemini ecosystem are now locked out. They can't inspect, fork, or modify this new product. Google is making a highly risky bet here. They're hoping the crazy speed gains from their new multi-agent workflows will somehow pacify a community that is furious about losing its open-source access.
Which brings us to part 3, the sole origin story, the geographic root of the ban.
To really grasp why this entire industry is on such a razor's edge, we need to trace things back to the very beginning. The spark that lit this whole fire was in South Korea. That is where a third party actually managed to extract software vulnerability data from Fable 5. It was a successful jailbreak demonstration. Amazon escalated it to US officials, and boom, that is what ultimately triggered the massive Commerce Department shutdown.
But here is where it gets incredibly wild. Managing an astonishing amount of institutional complexity, Anthropic went ahead and officially opened a brand new flagship international office in Seoul on day 6 of the export control shutdown. Think about that. They are proudly setting up shop right in the epicenter of where the jailbreak happened, throwing a launch party while their flagship models remain totally inaccessible to the very South Korean users they're trying to win over.
And at that exact launch, Anthropic's international managing director, Chris Fiore, publicly committed that Fable 5 and Mythos 5 will return within days.
That is not just vague corporate PR. That's an aggressive public bet that they can smooth things over with Washington incredibly fast. If he's right, pushing forward with the Seoul office was a brilliant operational move. If he's wrong, it's a massive PR disaster.
Let's look at the timeline in Part 4, the ticking AI clock, squeezed by the calendar.
The reality is, Washington is striking a much harder tone, meaning the calendar is doing the negotiating right now, not the executives. Just look at how tight this timeline is. The models went dark on June 12th. The Seoul office opened on the 17th. Now they've got a costly refund deadline hitting on June 20th and a highly critical Fable 5 pricing window that closes on June 22nd. They are getting squeezed from every possible angle in just a matter of days.
And if that within days promise falls through, the financial impact will be severe. Right now, prediction markets are giving Anthropic only a 60% chance of securing a U.S. restoration by July 1st. 60%! Confidence is absolutely wavering, meaning the next 72 to 96 hours are make or break for the company's survival strategy.
Finally, Part 5. Quick hits on the state of the AI world. Because while Anthropic is fighting with Washington, the rest of the ecosystem is sprinting. OpenAI is prepping to retire GPT 4.5 on June 27th. SpaceX is waiting for the ink to dry on that jaw-dropping $60 billion Cursor buyout. Microsoft is literally leaning on Amazon's AWS servers to keep GitHub afloat. And Cohere just quietly added Canada to the Project Glasswing consortium. Nobody is sitting still.
So as we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with this question. Will Anthropic actually patch the vulnerability and get back online before that June 22nd pricing window slams shut? Or are we just watching a permanent shift, a new, fractured reality where open source gets aggressively dismantled by tech giants and government kill switches dictate the pace of global innovation? Think about it. The clock is definitely ticking. Thanks for joining me today.